I like Anne's story about the serendipity of science. I'd like to back that up, and that's often, in my experience, the best stories and the best research ideas come out of absolutely nowhere. I was worried a bit, Anne, about where the other angler is actually today. Whether or not we actually got the right one here, but I'm sure we did. After hearing your talk, clearly we did. Martin and his team, thanks for the welcome. I was originally given a remit to talk broadly about all research in Scotland, it seemed, but I'm not going to be so presumptuous and ambitious. What I'll try and do is outline and not kill you in the process with too many slides, the research portfolio that's been developed for the new funding round on behalf of the Scottish Government, using Scottish Government funding, by what's known as the collective of the main research providers who are, you can see their logos on the first slide here. Now, for those of you who don't know the main research providers, they're the James Hutton Institute, which is formerly Macaulay Institute and the Scottish Crop Research Institute in Dundee. SAC, where I work, the Scottish Agricultural College, is formerly known, often still known as Scottish Agricultural College. BIOS, Biomathematics and Statistics Scotland, who are, as their name suggests, a data and statistical provider of science backing for the other research institutes and undertake science research themselves. The Morden Institute of Animal Research and the Rout Institute for Nutrition and Health, and finally the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. Now, it's important for you to probably understand this collective, because for those that don't work inside it, it's sometimes somewhat impenetrable about where the research funding comes from and how it actually is networked with the university community in Scotland. But I'm not going to speak on behalf of these institutes. What I'm going to do is tell you a bit about the Scottish government funding portfolio that we're going into now for the next 5 years. Some of that feeds on from the previous 5 years of research. Okay, so as I said, there's a 5-year programme of research just about to kick off. It's funded by the government to the tune of approximately £40 million. Not all of that is research, pure research. Most of it is applied. The majority of it is actually applied. And a good proportion of that research money is earmarked for knowledge transfer and exchange. The research is organised under 8 themes, which I'll show you in a minute. And interestingly, this year, by way of trying to improve the collaborative effort with research institutes and universities outside this collective, and also to make this money somewhat more competitively accessed, the government formally rerouted the research, the Rural and Environmental Affairs Directive, which is now known as something else, which I need to clarify the name. Has actually ring-fenced some of this money for specific centres of expertise and strategic partnerships, one of which is a climate change centre of expertise, which I'll quickly mention somewhere in the talk. The research that has evolved in the documentation, which I think is now freely available, is organised under 2 main headings. Environmental change is one, food, land and people is the other. Under environmental change, there are 4 sub-themes, or we call them themes. We're trying not to use the numbers. These numbers confuse the clients and government as they do ourselves as researchers. But the main climate change work is located in theme 3, technologies and management and tools to deliver greater benefits to rural land. So there's a lot of work on land management and mitigation and adaptation on the land. I should say that obviously, because of the nature of the institutes that you saw in the logos, a lot of this is land-based research and science. A lot of it is on food and agriculture. Theme 4 is more economy-wide understanding of what we can do at a landscape scale to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Now, those are the principal repositories of climate change research that you'll find if you delve into this documentation. And it's a long read, so be prepared. But there's also obvious links across to other things. So, for example, theme 1, ecosystem goods and services, necessarily has to deal with mitigation of greenhouse gases through ecosystem change. And also things like theme 5, which is resilient food supply chain skills with life cycle analysis in the food chain. So you get cross-linkages in several locations, and of course there's other linkages with animal health and safe diets as well. Now, the Centre of Expertise was this interesting innovation on the part of the government in terms of ring-fencing some of the money and trying to ring-fence that money and use it in a way which is more focused on policy needs and knowledge transfer and exchange. And the other interesting ambition for this money was to try and make the collective of main research providers work more collaboratively with university partners outside. The process is nascent, so it's not worked terrifically well in the first instance, but you can imagine it will get much better. Ring-fencing and making the institutes go out and collaborate across disciplines and across institutes is a really great idea. And also this makes the collective look beyond the land-based sector. To cut a long story short, there are 3 work streams contained within this money, which I think over all of the centres of expertise and the strategic partnerships was something like 20%. I could be wrong there. I couldn't give you the exact percentage of that 40 million that's going into the centre of expertise. The process has happened, the documents have been finalised, and the work is more or less commissioned. Under the climate change centre of expertise, we have 3 work streams: adaptation, mitigation and risk, and the centre directorate, which is headed up in part by Andy Curtis here today. Okay, just to map some of this stuff, I'm not sure this is particularly necessary, but you see the Scottish Government responsible for the strategic programme which I've just described. There's other ring-fence money which is for specific advice and seed corn for growing new areas of science as they come over the horizon. The strategic partnerships are food and drink and animal science, that's the Animal Science Centre of Excellence, and what I just described as the centres of expertise, including the Climate Change Centre, water, and animal diseases. And finally, there's a pot of competitively awarded money for other unforeseen projects which civil servants need to commission, which is open to everybody. Okay, so what's the background to all of the developments I've talked to you about? Well, this is more of a personal perspective. I guess this is the best summary I can come up with. Understanding impacts, selection, adaptation strategies, identifying mitigation strategies. Effectiveness, efficiency and equity, which I think is the best way I can find to describe the cross-disciplinary effort that's gone into this work. Now, effectiveness is really the science. We are all scientists, and from different scientific perspectives, there's research going on into effective methods of mitigating and adapting and reducing risk, or understanding risk. But I think interestingly, the introduction of social sciences is important to understand the questions of efficiency and equity. In other words, just because you can do science, it's not always the case that the science you're doing is the best targeted science or the thing worth doing when it comes down to cost effectiveness. And of course, somebody's got to do all these things. Somebody's got to mitigate, somebody's got to adapt, and so there's a question of equity which often drops off the radar. There's a big effort going into understanding synergies and trade-offs and between the responses, and some effort going into behaviours. And the question of inventory right at the bottom should really have gone underneath mitigation. Are we counting emissions correctly? Right, well, I can probably skip over a lot of the science because I think it's probably the case that most of you know all the basic background and the warming trajectories and what we're already committed to and what we're trying to deal with, and the event of extreme events. What this does do, though, our understanding is provided the basic material for UK SIP 9, which is the basic data we can downscale to begin the stories that we're trying to pad out in terms of impacts and adaptation. Now, to take an example, we know that UK SIP 9 gives us some fairly good spatially referenced data on temperature and precipitation. And for